Likkutei Sichot, Volume 2, Parshas Devarim, Section 3, page 65. ראשיתה של בשורת הגלות הייתה בברית בין הבתרים. The first time we were told about the impending exile was in the covenant between the shards, in Bereshis. כפי שנאמר שם, אימה חשיכה גדולה נופלת עליו. There was a deep terror, darkness, great darkness falling upon him, upon Abraham. רמז לארבע גלויות. And these words, אימה חשיכה גדולה נופלת, this terrible fear and terror that was falling upon Abraham after the covenant was over, was a sign of the impending exile. Now, why did it happen during a covenant, or right after the covenant? Why was this the first time that Abraham and the Jewish people in general were told that there's going to be something called an exile? תוכנה של כריתת ברית בין שני אוהבים, the meaning of creating a covenant between two people who love each other, הוא שבכל מצב שיווצר, אף שלא יהיה כל בסיס וטעם לאהבה, ואף יהיו גורמים להיפוכה של האהבה, גם אז תתקיים האהבה בתוקפה. Is so that regardless of what the situation might be, and even in situations in which the love should have been the care for each other, the camaraderie, the solidarity would be over because of the situation. Could be that one hurt the other, one did something to the other, whatever it was, the circumstances. Still, they would be able, because of the covenant, to keep their love. That's the purpose of a covenant. That's what it means also to get married. That's why we call it Brit HaNisuin. Brit HaNisuin means regardless of what the situation is, I'm still Ne'eman. I just say Ne'eman. I'm still faithful to you. You can still trust me. לתקופה בה קיימים נימוקים לאהבה, אין צורך בכריתת ברית. As long as the situation is such that you don't need any reason to take the marriage contract out of the drawer, or whatever other kind of contract you signed. So everything's good and dandy. You don't need any reason to keep the connection going. פעולתה של כריתת ברית היא לקיים את האהבה תמיד, משום שאין זו אהבה על פי טעם ודעת. אהבה תלויה בדבר, כשבטל דבר בטלה אהבה, כי אם אהבה עצמותית, meaning עצמית, בלתי מוגבלת. But rather, the point of making a covenant is to force the love to be essential, to be substantial, that it touches your very substance. Meaning, in other words, love here doesn't necessarily mean people, whenever they hear the word love today, they hear some kind of romantic Hollywood version. That's not love. Love is, like we said, it's faithfulness to one another. It means that we're together in this. Love means affinity, really, a connection. So this connection is such that it's not dependent on anything. So if something happens and it hurts the connection, so still the connection will weather the storm. Why? Because it's not dependent on anything but our very substance, our very being. The fact that we're alive. בעת כריתת הברית מאירה אהבה עצמית שאינה תלויה בדבר. I don't know why they decided to change the word. The word in Hebrew is עצמית. That's how it is in the Yiddish original. But they decided that nobody understands what עצמית is or something like that, so they had to write עצמותית.
Maybe it's a printing mistake.
It's the second time already. They change it every time. They had strange ideas when they translated this into Hebrew. In any case,
Maybe they didn't speak Hebrew.
Maybe they didn't speak anything. They spoke Hebrew and they did a good job, but there's some words that I don't know why, they decided they needed to change. So when a covenant is being consecrated, כריתת הברית, that allows the substantial love to come out, the substantial connection. בגלוי נעשית איפה אז כריתת הברית שהאהבה תתקיים תמיד מבלי להתחשב עם כל שינוי במצב בעתיד. So what is happening now? That this affinity that is not dependent on anything is now coming out. It's being revealed. The act of making the covenant is what reveals it. What reveals this feeling that we have an essential, substantial connection. לאור האמור, בלתי מובן מדוע דווקא בשעת ברית בין הבתרים באה בשורה לגלות. So, if that's the case, you're showing that our connection is essential, why is it that specifically after Avram saw the end of the covenant being made? What was the end of the covenant? That he saw, Rashi says there, he saw a pillar of smoke moving between the shards. And that was like the sign that Hashem also, because the way that they used to do a covenant in their times was that they would take something, divide it in two, and they pass in between. That was the way that they would make a covenant. So Avram passed through between the shards first, and then he saw a pillar of smoke, that was a sign that Hashem had also passed through and consecrated the covenant. So why would it be that at that time he would be informed of the impending exile? Galuti hipucha shel ahava, afilu shel ahava shel pi tam v'dat. Because exile is the opposite of a connection. It's the opposite of love. Even of love that is dependent on reason. It's the opposite. וכל שכן של אהבה עצמית, כשמאירה אהבה עצמית, מה המקום הזה לדבר על הגלות? So why in the world would Hashem inform him then, when this substantial connection is being revealed? לכאורה היה אפשר לתרץ הדבר על פי מאמר הז"ל שבחר אברהם אבינו שיעבוד מלכויות כנגד גיהנום. Can you close the door? Thanks. So seemingly, we could say, we could give a teretz. What? That the sages say that Avram had to choose between being subjugated to a nation or having Gehenna, what people in English call hell, but it's nothing like that. Because the Gehenna we know is equal to Gamzu Latova. This too is for the good. Gehenna is what is it? Here it's written incorrectly. There's only one yud in Gehenom. So it's 8, 18, 68, 108, 114, but there's no vav. So it's 108. Gehenom is 108 and Gamzu Latova is 108. So, כך שיש טובה בגלות, לפיכך דובר אודותיה בשעת גילוי אהבה. So that's Gamzu Latova. Gehenna, what does it mean? This too is for the good. So you're saying the exile is also there's also some good in it. So what are you saying? You're saying that because our connection is now so substantial that we can find the good even in a negative situation. So that's why Hashem revealed it to him now. Because when the substantial connection has been revealed, so you can tolerate this idea of exile. Meaning, what are you saying? You're saying that under the chuppah, a man and a woman are making a bris between them, they're making a covenant between them. So they have some fears, right? Somebody comes up to them and says, that's how the goyim do, right? What do they tell them? In sickness and in health. Why would somebody's under the chuppah, start telling them that they're going to be sick? What are you doing? No. The idea is that we're preparing you for all the contingencies and telling you that the substance of your connection is now so strong that you'll be able to tolerate even a state of sickness and you still be connected. You won't leave each other, which does happen. And people are hurt in a car accident, God forbid, or something like that, and they become debilitated, handicapped in some way. And the spouse leaves because this is not what I signed up for. So they tell them beforehand, no, this is also part of what it means to be in a covenant of marriage. אלא שאין תירוץ זה מספיק, שכן כשפועלת אהבה בהתגלות, ובמיוחד שמתגלה אהבה עצמית, אין מקום כלל לדבר לא על גיהנום ולא על שיבוד מלכויות. But the truth is, says the Rebbe, that when the substantial love is, the substantial connection is being revealed, there's no room to talk about these contingencies. It's true that you now have the power to, as it were, to think about them and say, yes, even when that happens, I take it upon myself to remain in a covenant. So it's not enough. So he doesn't say here why it's not enough, but I think everybody understands. It's not the time or the place to speak about these things. There has to be a much, much better reason, and the better reason will be of the type that it's increasing the feeling of the covenant, increasing the substance of the love that's being created between us. So, section 4. אך הדבר יובן לפי הסברת תורת החסידות, התוכנו הפנימי של עניין הגלות. וכך גם יסולק קושי על פי הנגלה בגמרא ובמדרש. So he says, to understand this, we have to understand better what exile means. What does galus actually mean? בגמרא נאמר, כי בזמן של עת רצון, וכשישראל עושים רצונו של מקום, היה מעמד הקרובים פניהם איש אל אחיו. The Gemara says that in the temple, when the Jewish people were in a good state of connection with Hashem, and the connection was apparent in their conduct, in their daily conduct, in the way that the nation was holding itself and how it was acting. So the two cherubim that were, now the question becomes, is it the two cherubim on the ark, or is this the cherubim that Shlomo Melech made? And the answer is it's the cherubim that Shlomo made. It's not the ones that are on the ark. The ones that are on the ark, they're made of solid gold. They can't move. But the ones that were made, that were 2 meters tall, and they were above the entire ark. They were on a tzir. How do you say tzir?
Runner.
No. It's like like an axis. They were like kind of pole, and they could be turned around. So I don't know if somebody went in there to turn it around. It could have come from the top. You could turn it around, or they turned around themselves. I don't know what it was, but it was like a thermometer that it told you what the situation between the Jewish people and Hashem were, because these two cherubim, these two angel forms, they represented God and the Jewish people. So if they were facing each other, it was a sign that we're in a good state. And if they weren't facing each other, the pshat of it would be that somebody came from above. You're allowed to go for bedek habayit, you're allowed to go fix things. So this might have been part of the fixing. They never touched the floor, they came from above, and they would churn them. And it was important, because when people came to the temple, they opened the doors. And they also showed what was going on inside. They would move the curtain so that they could see. And so it was an important thing for people to know. Where are we? Should we be improving ourselves? Not improving? It was like a way of it was an early warning system in a certain sense, and a way to communicate before there was TV and internet. Right? So it was a way to tell people where are we standing. So when they were in a good connection between them, the Jewish people and God, so these two cherubim were facing one another. Kemar ish veloyot. It's the pasuk in Melachim, which Chazal tell us means that it was more than just that they were facing each other. These cherubim had wings, so you couldn't see what was going on really. You could see just if they were facing each other or not. But they were constructed in such a way that when they were facing each other perfectly, they were also like a married couple, like they were having relations. But it was covered by their wings, you couldn't see it. There's people who, I've heard already, especially academics, who don't know how to read Gemara, and who don't know how to read anything. And they have their imagination runs wild in their heads. So they say, oh, this is the perfect example of what the Greeks said, that art is connected to eros. That to have any sense of inspiration, art is inspiration, you need to see something erotic. It's nonsense. They were covered completely, you couldn't see. What you could see is that they were facing pne'em ish el achiv. And the pasuk reveals that underneath the wings there was more of a connection than just the facing one another. But that could not be seen by anyone. Pshat. It's not even, you don't even have to prove these things. Very, very simple things. ובזמן שאין עושים רצונו של מקום, שאז אין זו עת רצון, היה מעמד הקרובים הפוך. But when there was no good connection between the Jewish people and Hashem, so they were not facing each other, they faced the front. When it was really bad, I guess they faced back to back. They turned them around completely so that they were facing back to back. במדרש נאמר שבשעה שנכנסו הנוכחים לקודשי הקודשים ראו את הכרובים פניהם משל אחיו כמעריש ולויות ושלחו אותם על פני כל האומות ראו למה ומה זו עובדת. So it says when the Moabites and the Ammonites joined the Assyrians and the Babylonians in destroying the temple. Why do I say Assyrians? Because Nebuchadnezzar was a general in the Assyrian army. And he was one of the few people that escaped from the great killing field that God killed the Assyrians when they came to Jerusalem in the time of Chizkiyahu. And then he went to Babylon, and there he created his empire, the Babylonian empire. So this man, Nebuchadnezzar, he started off as the Assyrian general. So he probably brought the Assyrians with him also. So the Assyrians and the Ammonites and Moabites and Babylonians, they came and destroyed the temple. So when they went in, the Ammonites and the Moabites, who we know are very promiscuous. They were born from a promiscuous incest between Noach and his daughters. So they went in, and they had they have a grudge, and they have a chip on their shoulder for generations. And they keep saying, "You Jews tell us in your Torah about our whole descent, where we came from, and why did she name him Ben Ami? Why was it called Moav? All these names, and we're hiding the fact that they came from incest, but it was sort of hinted in their names, because the girls, the Noach's daughters." Lot's daughters, I keep saying Noach, Lot's daughters, they wanted their offspring to know that they had, because they looked at it as we had saved the world. They wanted them to know, look at what we sacrificed in order to save the world. But soon enough it became known that this wasn't saving the world or anything, it was just a type of incest. So they were very ashamed of it, and they didn't like the fact that in the Torah the whole story was being told, and the Jews knew the whole story. So they came in, and they said, look at these people. They keep telling us that we're the ones who are promiscuous. We're the ones who are born of incest. But look at them. What are they worshiping? They're worshiping, and at that time, the two big cherubim, were face to face and locked in this intercourse. And this was at the time of the destruction of the temple. So they saw this, and they couldn't take pictures of it, but I guess they drew it, or they just took them out and showed them the way they were, so that everybody would see who the Jewish people are worshiping. They claimed they were worshiping these cherubim. They're not worshiping God, because we've talked about this, that the Romans, pagans in general, used to call Jews atheists. Why are they atheists? Because they don't have a God. What do you mean? If you don't have a God, you can't show me your God. What are you worshiping? So they said, no, they're not real atheists. They're lying to us. They do have a God. It's these two things. And what are they worshiping? They're worshiping sexual conduct. That's what they care about. It was their way of getting back at us.
It's just a problem with that story.
What's the problem?
That the Kruvim and the Arla Kodesh and everything was put down in the Geniza 300 years before the...
No, that's why we're talking about these big ones that the Shlomo made. The ark was not there. That was all they saw. That was the whole point. The ark was not there. The Sefer Torah wasn't there. Aaron's staff wasn't there. None of the things that could be moved were there, because they had put them underneath in the tunnels underneath. But what was left above were the two cherubim. So what's going on? Why is it like that? נשאלת איפה הקושייה, שעת החורבן הייתה הרי היפוכה של עת רצון, מדוע אם כן אז היה אז מעמד הקרובים פניהם משל אחיו? So why was it that at that time of the destruction of the temple you're saying that we were the closest to God that we ever were? How can that be? How could they be locked together, not just facing one another? So בתורת החסידות מוסבר התוכן הפנימי של הגלות במשל השפעת הרב לתלמיד. So in Chassidus it's explained that, and this is the famous mashal from Reb Hillel of Paritch. Okay? He doesn't mention this here. It's interesting. It just says a Chassidus. There's no footnote. When the Rebbe said this in 1955, 56, I'm not sure that they even knew that this was a mashal from Reb Hillel of Paritch. Maybe he mentions it later. I don't remember. But here it doesn't mention, it's just a mashal in Chassidus. What's the mashal? You know this mashal? You've heard it? It's the most incredible mashal about what Galus is. It goes like this, that really, you have to think of a student and a teacher. And the teacher is teaching the student. We'll say it quickly. כשהרב משפיע השכלה על תלמידו, הוא נתון בתשומת לב אל התלמיד. כשתוך כדי השפעה מבצבץ בשכלו של הרב רעיון חדש, הרי בטבעה של כל הברקה שכלית חייב הרב להפנות את דעתו מיד אל ההברקה החדשה, שאם לא כן היא תיעלם ולא יועילו לאחר מכן כל היגיעות. פני עוצם פנימיות אהבתו של הרב לתלמיד, הוא רוצה איפה להתמסר להברקה כדי שיוכל לקולטה ולהעבירה כעבור זמן גם לתלמיד. So it says, you have to imagine that a Rebbe is standing in front of his students and he's teaching them some pshat. And as he's teaching, he suddenly gets this brilliant idea. There's a much better way to explain this. I have a new insight into this whole sugi. I understand something I've never understood before. What does he do? So instead of trying to now, on the fly, express what he's just realized, what he's just been inspired to realize, so he stops. And he stops because of his love for his students, because he wants to give them something that's fully baked. He doesn't want to just spit it out. He wants to actually say something that will sit well. He wants to think it through. He knows that this is a tremendous insight that he just had, but it's going to take him time to really process it. So he stops talking. So now he's not focused on the students. He's focused on the insight that he just had. But he's not focused on the insight because he loves the insight. He's focused on the insight because he knows the benefit it will give his students. So he switches his attention. He moves his attention to the insight. בשעה שהרב מפנה תשומת ליבו להברקה הרעיון החדש, הרי בא במידה שגדלה תשומת ליבו לרעיון, כך מתמעט תשומת הלב לתלמיד ומתמעט גם ההשפעה. So the more he's now involved with the insight, paying attention to his insight, trying to process it, the less he's involved and paying attention to his talmidim, to his students. ככל שהרעיון החדש נעלה ונעמוק יותר, צריכה להיות רבה יותר ההתמסרות אליו. משום כך גדלה יותר הסחת הדעת מן התלמיד בשעה זו, עד כדי היווצרות עניין של גלות וחורבן לדידו של התלמיד. So the greater this insight is, the less attention he can pay to the students, and the more time he has to dedicate now to processing what he just realized. So what's going on here? ברם אין זה החורבן והגלות כי אם בבחינה חיצונית, בבחינה פנימית, העניין הרי כאן תכלית הגילוי. So really he's saying that the destruction of the temple, which looks like Hashem has abandoned us, is the same thing as this teacher seemingly now not paying attention to his students, who he loves very much. And he's now paying attention to something else. So they look at him and they think he's gone. Where'd he go? But he's really involved in preparing something for them. Some insight that he just received. Of course, there's a big question. That maybe you can say about the first temple. But about the second temple? What are you saying? That Hashem has been holding back an insight for 2,000 years? It's taking him 2,000 years now to process this insight. It's a good mashal for the first destruction. But the second destruction? Why is it taking so long? What's he doing? Yeah.
Good question.
And with that question, we'll end today. And maybe we'll answer it tomorrow.